This city e-bike is the Fiido Air, and it's one of the lightest e-bikes we've tested thanks to its carbon fiber construction. It's also packed with some really cool technology, it even comes with a smartwatch, and it's priced below $2,000 at the time of filming, so is this bike a dream come true, or too good to be true? Let's take a ride and find out. Welcome to Electric Bike Report, where we strive to be the best source of e-bike reviews on the internet. My name's John, and I'll be your host for this review of the Fiido Air. If you haven't been here before, thanks for joining me today. I think you're gonna like what we have in store for you. We pride ourselves on our detailed reviews that center around a series of standardized performance tests, so please be sure to hit that subscribe button down below so you can find your way back in the future, and please also consider using the affiliate link in the video description if or when you make a purchase, as we do earn commissions that help support all the time and effort we put into our content. But enough of the boring administrative stuff, let's assess the Air and see what this bike has to offer. Starting with a few highlights about this bike, I'm gonna lead off with value as one of the biggest appealing features. Now, we're in the middle of a trade war at the time of filming, so pricing could change at any point, but at least at the time of filming, the Air is priced well below $2,000, which is essentially unheard of for an e-bike with a carbon fiber frame, let alone one that also has a carbon fiber fork, seat post, and handlebars. So with its construction material alone, this bike is a fantastic deal, but it also includes some really cool tech. There's a single button interface on the top tube with a fingerprint sensor for security, plus the bike comes with a smartwatch that can function as the bike's display and control panel, in addition to monitoring health data, syncing messages and notifications with your phone, and a few other things. If it's not clear, the Air gives you a ridiculous amount of bang for the buck, and the total package is something to behold. Moving on though, this bike's carbon fiber construction is another highlight because of its benefits in weight reduction, ride comfort, and handling. The Air weighs in at 32.7 pounds, making it one of the lightest e-bikes we've tested. Its low weight makes it easy to carry or transport, and it also helps this bike to feel super nimble and quick to get up to speed. On top of that, carbon fiber flexes a bit more than steel or aluminum, so a lot of little bumps end up getting absorbed enough that you don't really notice them while riding. But then finally, I've got to mention how responsive and natural this bike feels to ride. It's powered by a 250-watt rear hub motor that's paired with a torque sensor, so it has a light level of power that doesn't overtake your own effort, and the motor can adapt to how you ride by giving you more or less power if you pedal harder or softer. Going through the rest of the specs and components, there's a fully internal 36-volt, 209 watt-hour battery concealed in the down tube. The bike has a super low-maintenance single-speed drivetrain with a 60-tooth chainring and a 22-tooth rear cog paired with a long-lasting Gates carbon belt. For brakes, there's a set of Tektro HD M275N hydraulic disc brakes with 2 piston calipers and 160mm rotors on both wheels. The bike has a set of knobby 700C by 40mm gravel tires from Kenda. There's a slim Velo saddle on the bike's carbon fiber aero seat post, and then there's a really slick headlight and taillight integrated right into the frame. Up in the cockpit, things are really clean and streamlined with all the bike's cables routed internally through the custom stem and headset. The carbon fiber handlebars measure 640 millimeters wide, they have a set of squishy lock-on rubber grips, and the only other thing on them aside from the brake levers is a front reflector and a bell. A few final details before we get into our test sections. The Fiido Air is a Class 1 e-bike that's set up for the European market with pedal assist up to 25 kilometers per hour, which translates to 15.5 miles per hour here in the US. It comes in 3 frame sizes with only 1 color option. The bike is UL 2849 certified, and our contact said that the battery should be UL 2271 certified in the near future. And finally, the Air has a total payload capacity of 264, not just British pounds. So with that bad joke out of the way, let's see how this bike performed. We tested the Fiido Air's hydraulic brake system by pedaling up to 20 miles per hour, hitting the brakes, and then measuring the distance the bike traveled before coming to a stop. My fellow reviewer Griffin does all of our brake tests for consistency, and he repeats the same process 3 times to smooth out any inconsistencies. The Air averaged a stopping distance of 25 feet and 2 inches, which is just under 2 feet longer than average for the city e-bike category. Now, in practice, Griffin and I both agree that the brakes on this bike felt great. In fact, this particular brake system usually has very solid results, but this was a bit of an unusual case where the test results didn't quite line up with our expectations or the bike's actual feel. I'm quoting Griffin here with his permission, but he said he thought this might be a case of a heavy guy on a super lightweight bike. Basically that his inertia kept him going longer than usual, and that someone under his 230 pounds might have better results. In my personal testing, the bike did feel like it wanted to skid for longer than I expected, so I do recommend getting in some practice with it once it arrives, so you know what to be prepared for, but I do think it felt safe. I like that the bike has integrated lights for visibility, but to increase its safety factor, I would like to see a tail light that functions as a brake light in the future. Otherwise, the Air is set up well spec-wise, so I don't think any changes are necessary, but if you want to shorten up that stopping distance, you could always swap out the tires for something with a bit more grip on paved surfaces. Next up is our speed test, where I took the Air out to get some air on our local shared use paths. The goal of this test was to see how fast the bike could be in each pedal assist setting, and it was actually a lot easier here than in most cases for reasons I'll get into shortly, but let's see how the test went and we can talk more about the results back here in the studio. All right, we are here for a speed test on the Fiido Air. So starting things out with no pedal assist here and going at a pretty good clip just because of how light this bike is. So kind of going between 13.5 and 14 miles per hour by the app that I'm using. Now I do have the watch on that pairs with the bike. You can see 13 to 14 miles per hour there. Yep. So again, kind of in that range. There are only 2 pedal assist settings here, so this test is going to be pretty short, but I'll kind of walk you through that. You can change the pedal assist mode through the watch or through the button on the top tube here, or the fingerprint reader, I guess, not button. But let's go ahead and bump up to the lowest level of pedal assist, which is called normal mode. So you can, you heard the motor kick in, power delivery is immediate, and yeah, pretty impressive so far. I mean, getting a big difference in speed definitely made pedaling a lot easier, and it just feels really responsive, feels nice. I can feel the motor giving me more power as I push into the pedals, just because of the torque sensor there, although we are kind of topping out with the amount of pedal assist, just the speed that this bike can go. So being made in the EU, it does have a pedal assisted speed up to around 15.5 miles per hour. So, my pedaling adds in a little bit more, and we're reaching that very easily here. So yeah, between 15.5 and 16. Well, let's bump up into sport mode, which is the other level. And, you can see we're really not getting any difference just because we are there. But, if I add in a little of my leg power, we can definitely pick up more speed here, a couple miles per hour pretty easily. But again, yeah, the motor will only help you up to about 15.5 or 16. So it's doing its job. So we'll call it there. Let's go ahead and bounce back to the studio and talk a little bit more. To go back over my average speeds in that test, I started off with comfortable pedaling at a pretty consistent 13.8 miles per hour with no pedal assist, and then ended up with very similar results in both normal and sport mode, with 15.9 miles per hour in the lower power level and an even 16 miles per hour in the higher setting. As you can see by the graphs of those two results, the difference between the two settings was negligible. Going by feel, pedaling felt a little easier in sport mode, with normal mode feeling a bit more like a non-electric bike, so there did seem to be a slight difference in power output, but the 15.5 mile per hour speed limit didn't really give the motor enough room to show that in this test. The bike's speed limit is the standard over in Europe, so it's set up well for that market, but I think a lot of riders here in the US will find the speed cap somewhat limiting. I think it would be great if Fiido offered a US version of the Air with a higher speed limit that would put it on par with most similar models we've tested, and I think there are lots of folks out there who would agree. I do have to give this bike props for its quick acceleration and responsive pedal assist system, and I've got to say that most of the time I didn't mind the lower speed limit because the bike's low weight makes it feel a lot faster than it actually is. So overall, I think it did a decent job in this test, even if there is some room for improvement. We tested the Fiido Air's range in 2 tests where we pedaled until the battery gave out. We started off in sport mode to find its minimum range and then switched over to normal mode for a maximum range test once the battery had recharged. We used Strava to track our mileage, and we recorded 24.9 miles for the sport mode test and 43.8 miles in the normal mode test. Both of these results are right around average for the city e-bike category. The ones we tested previously went 23 and 43.6 miles on average, so the Fiido went a bit longer and its results differed by less than 2 miles. So this goes to show that the Air is generally spec'd well and it can keep pace with its peers, but I noticed some interesting things when I dove in a little bit deeper. If you remember back in our speed test, there didn't seem to be a whole lot of difference between the two pedal assist settings, and this was backed up by Fiido's own range test results using a rider weighing 176 pounds. The brand's test rider went 32.3 and 37.5 miles, showing a difference of only about 5 miles, which is much less of a gap than we typically see between a bike's highest and lowest power levels. You might wonder why we ended up with a much wider range of results, and that's actually what got me digging in a little bit deeper. The difference seems to be related to rider weight, and this is a good example of how much weight can influence a bike's range. So I did our sport mode test, and I weigh around 190, so about 15 pounds heavier than Fiido's test rider. Our rider for the normal mode test was Asha, who weighs around 160 pounds, which is about 15 pounds lighter than Fiido's rider. Their test results landed right in the middle of ours, which makes a lot of sense considering that their test rider was also right between Asha and I in terms of weight. Based on my experience, I'd suggest sticking with normal mode so you can maximize your range with this bike, but even in sport mode, there should be enough range to cover a long round trip commute or a few short ones. With the included 2-amp charger, you should be able to recharge the bike's 209 watt-hour battery in about 3 hours. And finally, if you're looking to be able to cover more miles from a single charge, Fiido does offer an external range extender battery for around $250 that they say can double what you'll get from the internal battery. In our hill test, we took the Fiido Air to a location called Hellhole Trail, which is a steep hill with a 12% grade over 1/3 of a mile that's connected to our local network of paved shared use paths. Our test rider Justin rode the bike in sport mode to see how well it would climb, so let's go see how the test went and we can go over the results back here.
All right, we are at Hellhole on the Fiido Air. It is one of the lightest bikes that we've tested on this hill, so we're gonna see how it does. Single gear, you know, very lightweight commuter, so those usually have to push a little bit more, and so far it's kind of what I'm feeling. Felt peppy on flats. Hitting this section here, definitely am having to like pedal. I'm still on the saddle. I don't think I'll have to come off. I think if I was just riding it, I'd stand up and come off the saddle. I kind of messed up this test, so I'm not going to do it here. Let these kids pass. Okay, so I don't have any way to tell you how fast I'm going. Whew. I'm breathing a little bit. Still better than a normal bike, but I'm feeling it. So I'll let you listen through this next section. I'm gonna come off the saddle here. So through the real steep sections, kind of feels more like a regular road bike. Isn't bad. Definitely feels more peppy on flats. So as far as time goes, we'll see how it does. Expectations were not very high for me out of the gate. Again, being a super lightweight, carbon fiber all the way bike, not to be expected. But we'll finish up here, go check the time, see how it does compared to the other ones like this.
Justin's phrase, still better than a regular bike, is the big thing to focus on here, but the Air did come in on the slower side in this test. Justin pedaled to the top of Hellhole Trail in 2 minutes and 14 seconds with an average speed of 8.1 miles per hour, which is about 22 seconds slower than average when compared to other lightweight city e-bikes we've tested. So while the Air showed that it can definitely make a tough climb easier, it did have a couple of things working against it here. For starters, the single-speed drivetrain is limiting when it comes to pedaling uphill, which is just kind of the nature of the beast. Single speed bikes have to balance their gearing between climbing and pedaling efficiently on flat ground, and honestly, this is about as good as it gets. But on top of that, this bike's motor output skews towards the light side with a peak of just 388 watts and 35 newton meters of torque, both of which are among the lowest we've seen for a style that already tends to favor a natural feel. To add to what I said earlier about wanting a US version of the bike with higher speeds, I'd also like to see a more powerful motor to offset the limitations of the drivetrain for those who do live in hillier areas. As Justin said, this bike does feel a lot peppier on flat ground, and it's clearly optimized for cities without a lot of hills, but it can do the job of helping you pedal uphill as long as you don't mind a bit of a workout. The subject of ride quality covers all the things that influence how a bike feels to ride, from its sizing and riding position to its handling and also its user interface. The Fiido Air has quite a bit more to dive into than most bikes of this style, with the Fiido app, the included smartwatch, and the bike's fingerprint reader. Let's go out to the paths again and talk about some of the basics. You can see a bit more of what it's like to ride this bike, and then we'll get into the more technical stuff later on. All right, let's talk about ride quality here on the Fiido Air. So, this is a lightweight city bike, and this style of bike, it's made to get you from point A to point B. It's made to be pedaled, and pedaled efficiently at that. So, I think this bike definitely checks all the boxes there, as well as giving you quite a bit more than most bikes do. So, let's see. Let's talk about riding position first. So, again, this style of bike tends to kind of have a moderate to aggressive forward lean, and I'd say this one is maybe a hair on the more aggressive side than a lot of similar bikes out there, but that doesn't mean it's not comfortable. It's actually super comfortable. These soft rubber grips are nice and squishy, and then just the carbon fiber construction itself, you've got the frame, the fork, the handlebars, the seat post, all of that is kind of helping to absorb some vibrations that you would otherwise really notice on an alloy bike. So, it's just generally a bit softer here, even though there is no suspension. But anyway, the Air has 3 frame sizes. We're on the middle one, which is actually the large, but the height range for all 3 is 5'4" to 6'9". So I'm 5'11", and this one's really comfortable, as I said. I've got great leg extension. The reach is a little bit on the longer side. Whoops, sorry. So, I am putting some weight on the handlebars here, but that is still nice, feels good. And as far as adjustability goes, you're fairly limited. So you get about 4 inches of adjustment in your saddle height, and then up front, you don't have a whole lot of options here. You could swap out the handlebars if you want, but just the fact that all the cables are routed internally through the headset and the stem here, that may make it a little bit more difficult to swap out if you need some fit adjustment on the front end of the bike. But like I said, otherwise, at least for me, it feels really nice. Moving on though, so talked about the lack of suspension. You do get a little bit of squish from the tires. Those are 700 by 40C with a knobby tread pattern that's suitable for gravel. In fact, actually, let's go do a little off-roading for a couple quick seconds. Don't actually usually take this. A lot of people seem to, but good traction, feels good. Again, a little bit more, little bumpier there than on a paved surface, but otherwise feels really nice. And then we've talked a little bit about the motor as well. The 250 watt rear hub from Ebikes with a torque sensor. So again, just really smooth, really responsive, and overall pretty quiet. So I think it just really matches the style of the bike very well. And then, on top of all that stuff that we normally cover, there's also all the technology in this bike. So you've got the app, you've got the interface on the top tube here, and then you have the smartwatch. So it's kind of an interesting ecosystem of technology that, I think once it's set up, it works really well. I like that it's so connected here, which is, again, something that you don't see too often, especially not at this price point. So I'm gonna turn around here, but let's go ahead and bounce back to the studio. We'll talk about some of those things in more detail, and then I'll see you again for a walkthrough of the app, which should be pretty short. We'll talk about the smartwatch, and then I'll kind of give you a walkthrough of the
bike's interface here. So, all right, let's bounce back to the studio and I'll see you later.
I hope you could tell how much I enjoyed riding the Air from that clip. This style of bike tends to be one of my personal favorites, and I think this one is really top-notch in terms of its overall sizing, its comfort level, its responsive handling, and its natural-feeling pedal assist system. Like most of the other carbon fiber e-bikes I've tested, this one has a really lively and airy feel, go figure, with its name, and that's something that's really difficult to convey if you haven't experienced it for yourself. Back to the basics of sizing though, the smallest option, which is the medium frame, fits riders from 5'4" to 5'9". The large that we tested goes from 5'7" to 6'3", and the XL's range stretches from 6'1" to 6'9". That height range should cover most folks, but it does clearly skew a bit toward the taller end of the spectrum. Next, I want to touch on the benefits of the single-speed drivetrain a bit more, as it makes this bike generally easy to hop on and ride, as well as to own. There's no need to worry about shifting, so once you get the pedal assist system activated, you can just ride without worrying about much else. And the Gates Carbon Belts is rated to last at least twice as long as a chain, so there's not much maintenance to worry about aside from the brakes. But also, this setup doesn't require lubrication, so you'll never end up with grease stains on your pants once you get to work. One minor point of irritation I had with this bike was the kickstand placement. Now, the bike doesn't include a kickstand, so you won't have to worry about this unless you add it separately, but I wear a US men's size 12 shoe, and I found my left heel hitting the kickstand pretty often when pedaling, so I had to be very careful of my foot placement. But speaking of things that can be added separately, I was happy to see that Fiido offers fenders and side mirrors that you can pick up at purchase. Moving on to the tech side of things, it's pretty cool that you get a smartwatch with this bike. That's actually a first in my experience. I think it's a great alternative to forcing you to get a phone mount and using the app if you want some form of display, although getting everything set up and connected was a bit of a struggle. Now, part of that might have been my fault as I jumped in without reading the instructions and had to start from scratch a couple of times to get everything figured out. My main takeaway is that there's a bit of a learning curve to the system, and the instructions could be a bit more clear about a few things, but once I got everything set up, it seemed to work quite well. I really like the fact that the watch has a smart unlock feature, so as long as the main power button at the bottom of the front triangle is turned on, the Air will turn on automatically when you're wearing the watch and you get close to the bike. You can certainly still opt to use the app instead of the watch as your display, and you can disable the watch's ability to activate the bike if you do so. I also liked that you could set up multiple fingerprints for the bike if you share it between family members, but there's a lot the app can do, so let's head back out one more time and I'll walk you through everything.
All right, let's go ahead and do a walkthrough of the Fiido app here. So, gotta say right off the bat, so the home screen here has sort of a cool social media-like thing going on. I'm looking at just a list of posts from other Fiido riders. There's photos, there's ride data, there's routes. So that's really cool. I mean, I think Aventon is the only other company that I've seen do something like this. So that's good to see. And from the looks of things, you can, follow other users and interact with their posts, that sort of thing. Speaking of, we've got a list of the other riders you're following here. I don't currently have any, but then there's also kind of a leaderboard thing going on, which is pretty cool. So that goes from daily, weekly, monthly, and all time. And then that's, again, the home screen, but the main navigation's down here at the bottom. If we go over to device list, this shows that we are connected with the Fiido Air. And there's a lot of stuff in there that we'll cover in just a sec here, but I wanted to talk about a few other things. So first things first, kind of a lesson that I learned the hard way is, if I go to add device here, the smartwatch will show up, the Fiido S3. I recommend not pairing the watch with the app here. It can only be connected to one thing at a time, so if you do that, it seemed to kind of interfere with its ability to connect to the bike and show me the actual display there. So like I said, kind of leave it alone, just let it connect to the bike, and you should be good to go anyway. But moving on over here to the Me panel, we've got just my profile here. So shows, ride data, a summary of all of the time I've spent on the bike and the points I've earned, CO2 that I've cut, and then kind of where I am in the rankings, which is pretty embarrassing at the moment, but that's okay. This is, I've only been out here for a couple times, but in any case, I can make a post on that social media feature. It shows me a list of the people who I'm following and those following me. If I want, I can go in and change my my image. I can, personal information there. You can set a motto, which is kind of fun. And then up here in the top left, there's a little gear icon that's just kind of some administrative stuff that I
at least so far haven't found a real use for, but that might change if I owned this bike and rode it regularly. But let's go ahead and bounce back to the bike list here, the device list. So if we go into that, first things first, you'll see just kind of a control panel here. So we can turn the bike on and off from here just with that slider. And there we go. And we can turn the lights on and off. There's health data. So, the watch will pick up your a bunch of things like your step count, your heart rate, blood pressure, that sort of thing. And you can see all that stuff here. You can do that through the watch as well, but it's easily visible. You can track your rides with this button here. So you can see that's the screen that I had pulled up when we were doing the ride quality section earlier. There's a light and a dark mode to this, and then this is actually pretty cool. You can actually change out these sort of modules. So, let's say that instead of meters climbed, if I wanted to know what my maximum speed on the bike was, I can just sort of drag and drop that and save it, and then that will show up there in that spot. So yeah, pretty cool, useful information there. I don't know if you can change the pedal assist mode there, but that's okay. You can do that through the watch and again on the display. But if we bounce back here in the top right, there's some important stuff to cover. So the smart unlock feature is kind of the main thing. So earlier I mentioned not wanting to pair the watch with the app, and that's why basically it wasn't connecting with the bike. So this smart unlock thing where, if it is paired and I just walk up to the bike will unlock naturally. That wasn't working, and it wasn't allowing me to see the control panel for the bike. So this is kind of where I figured out what I had to do in order to get everything to function properly. But you can see that we can change the proximity distance that the bike requires as you're kind of walking up to it. And here you can see that we are paired with the watch, and you can shut that off if you want to. But like I said, I wouldn't mess with it, at least based on my experience. Bike guard is pretty cool. So this is basically, it can't be turned on without the app if you activate this. So kind of a nice security feature there. And then of course you can change your units as well, which for those of us here in the States is pretty important. But that really does it. That's the main features, all the stuff here to cover. Let's dive into the watch and the user interface for the bike though. Before I wrap up the review with my final thoughts about the Fiido Air, I wanted to show and explain a few more things about the bike's single button interface and the smartwatch. So earlier I mentioned that you can set up multiple fingerprints, and if you remember back when smartphones had fingerprint readers, setting up that feature with the Air is pretty similar. Once you activate the setup process through the app, you have to touch your finger to the reader a few times with different angles. It'll show either a red or green ring to let you know if the imprint was good or not, but then you're ready to roll. Using the interface is fairly straightforward. Just hold your finger on the reader for a few seconds until the bike beeps and the light ring around the reader comes on. Pressing your finger on the reader once will let you swap through the pedal assist levels, with the yellow ring indicating normal mode and the purple ring indicating sport mode. There's also a setting for no pedal assist, which also has a purple ring, and I think it would be more user-friendly if that were a different color, but knowing that sport mode comes after normal mode makes it fairly easy to navigate anyway. If you want to turn the lights on or off, you can just double tap the fingerprint reader, and then if for some reason you need to enter the Bluetooth pairing mode, be sure to use a finger that isn't synced with the bike, otherwise you'll just turn it off. Now, the light ring is also used to indicate the charge level in case you don't have the watch or app pulled up. A green ring means that there's 60% or more of the battery charge remaining. A blue light indicates 40 to 60%, and a red light means 10 to 40% of the charge is left. That's about all there is to that, so let's take a look at the watch. All right, so now let's take a look at the watch. Now I have the watch and the bike off right now because I wanted to show you the smart unlock feature. So as I turn the watch on, it's gonna pair with the bike and then turn the bike on automatically. There we go. And now we're looking at the bike mode for the watch, which shows a speedometer, your current pedal assist level, a bar-based battery readout for the bike. There's a bar-based battery readout for the watch, as well as a Bluetooth icon up there showing that we're paired. And then you've got the time up there as well. Now you can change pedal assist here by just tapping on the mode, and it'll cycle through those. And then you can turn the lights on and off with a short press of the power button there. But if you just want to go back to the regular watch mode, just hold that power button. You can tap on the watch mode, and then here we are with the sort of basic screen. You've got your time, weather, your date, step count for the day, heart rate, and then calories burned. Now, if you hold your finger on the faceplate, you can cycle between a few different options there. So this is the main one, but there's, I don't know, half a dozen or more other options you can choose. I think the main one shows information pretty clearly, so I tend to just stick with that one. But you know, depending on which way you swipe, there's a whole bunch of options and apps within the watch that you can access. So if you have it paired with your phone, you can get notifications, just swipe up to see those notifications, messages, that sort of thing. If you want to access sort of the watch's basic functions and settings, you can swipe down from the top. You can change the brightness. There's a night mode. You can lock it. There's a timer you can set up. You can also use it to find your phone with this little thing there. So, and that's where you turn the watch on and off. Then if you swipe right, you're basically scanning through many of the main apps. So this is sort of your basic health data with calories, your distance ran, and then your step count. You've got a sleep thing there. There's a heart rate monitor, a blood pressure monitor, blood oxygen, and then your weather. Now, I haven't figured out where to change the location for the weather or the units into degrees Fahrenheit, but that is there, and you know, I'm sure that there's a way to do that somewhere. And then if we go back to the main screen, if you swipe left, then this kind of gives you the individual apps that you can access from there. So again, the alarm, stopwatch, there's all the weather and other stuff there. That's the basic functions there. You can use this to track activities, so bike rides, runs, that sort of thing. But that's kind of everything here. Let's go ahead and bounce back to the normal review. The Fiido Air is a pretty interesting case of a bike that may not seem like it stands out much when we're looking at the face value of some of its test results, but I think the complete package is way more than the sum of its parts. This is one of the coolest and most unique bikes that I've tested so far. I think it rides really well, and I'm still blown away by its sheer value and how much it gives you for its price. Our testing showed that it's optimized for flat ground, and it should serve well as a daily ride to work or school. There are a few areas with room for improvement, including the user-friendliness of its setup process, the absence of brake lights, and the bike's relatively limited motor power and speed, at least for the US market. Even with those things in mind though, I think the pros far outweigh the cons, and I think the Air will, and should, appeal to anyone who wants a sporty and high-tech ride that won't break the bank. Considering all of the features that Fiido packed in at the Air's price point below $2,000, I wouldn't have been surprised if it felt cheaply made or gimmicky, but that's simply not the case. Sure, the smartwatch isn't from a name brand like Apple or Samsung, but it's totally functional and not something you see included with a bike every day, and it's also clear that a lot of time and effort went into designing and making this bike. The Fiido Air has a lot to offer, including a ridiculously low weight, great handling, a responsive pedal assist system, plenty of versatility in where it can ride, some cool security features, and great looks overall. So if any of those things matter to you, I think you'll like picking up what this bike is putting down. If you want to take a closer look at the Air, you can check out either of the two links in the video description. If you want a bit more detail about our tests, you can check out our written review at electricbikereport.com, or you can check current pricing and make a purchase that helps support our channel using the affiliate link to Fiido's website. Let us know your thoughts and questions down in the comments section. Please consider giving this video a like if you found it helpful, and feel free to check out any of our other content. But thanks for watching and taking a ride with me today. Again, I'm John with Electric Bike Report, and this is the Fiido Air.